Welcome to the 20th episode of Disorderly Blondes.
¿Cómo?
Oh yes, 20th. How did this happen? Didn't we just start this podcast?
Damn. Are we celebrating later? Maybe mimosas for lunch?
You mean this isn't champagne in my glass right now?
In your bottle?
Kidding, that can be arranged.
Oh, yeah. Now it's a party.
Woo-hoo!
Love it, love it, love it.
Today we're in Davie, Florida with Dr. Julia Harper, wife, mother, occupational therapist, business owner, psychologist, life coach, and mentor, speaker, and writer, and I'm tired.
Jeez, that's it? Get it together, Julia. Do something. Can you get off the couch? I mean...
Welcome to the podcast. We're so beyond excited to meet you, and we have to admit we're a little guarded. Just poquito. A little bit.
We need to know, will you be analyzing our behavior? Or have you already been analyzing our behavior? Because if so, we're just warning you, it might drive you to drink.
Not that that's a bad thing. Join us. What's in here?
Please join us.
Happy to join you.
Yay!
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yay!
Yeah.
So excited.
It's so cool that you guys are celebrating your 20th episode because we're celebrating our 20th anniversary.
We heard, and that is amazing.
Yeah.
And none of us are 20 years older or 20 months older.
Not at all.
Not at all. Just checking with that.
We are good. Today's topic is neuroplasticity, the brain's potential ability to adapt and change. But before we jump into today's complex topic.
Wait, complex.
Yes.
I might name that cocktail. Is there math involved?
Shocker. Before we jump in, we want to know more about you. The who, the what, the why, the journey.
The legend.
The legend. We do know that 20 years ago you had a successful office in New York doing traditional therapy. You lost the passion along the way and motivation.
Christy. It's the glasses. I take them off. I need bifocals. I take them off. I put them on.
Christy is fired.
I know. Sorry.
That's
And I
fine.
didn't highlight it. Sorry. Anyway, you felt strongly this was not what you were meant to do, as you may feel strongly that you made a bad choice. Recording with us today, but we're not going to talk about that. So you closed your practice, you moved to Florida, rented a small space to keep the connection to the community while you searched for the next phase. Why here?
Well, first of all, let's just be blunt. I am Caribbean, so I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and I had enough winters.
Yes.
Let's just begin
We
there.
get it.
Yes, we get it. Totally get it. Yes.
Yeah, they told me the first winter that I moved to New York that I'd get accustomed to the snow and that I was only cold because I was a newbie. And 17 winters later, it didn't get any better. It actually just got worse. So I just said, I'm heading south.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not. You say you bumped into the word neuroplasticity, just like Christy and I bump into it all the time.
Up to a lot of things.
And that's how we do with it, clearly. Bump into it and keep going. But
It's a big word.
Bumped, how did it stand out to you differently at that point in your life?
You know, it was kind of like love at first sight. It was that complex man across the room at the bar that you said he's kind of cute and I need to get to know more about him.
She's diving in.
It had been a word that you hear about in your traditional training. You know, I went to school in New York City. I was an occupational therapist very early in my life and had done, you know, the typical training. And you do the neuro classes because it's required, and you hear the word about neuroscience, and you learn about the brain. I had to dissect the brain. Fun. And, you know, but you learn those things to pass a test, and you didn't realize that it actually meant something. And ultimately what it came down to was that piece of passion where I was working with kids, making changes, but knowing that it wasn't really what I was called to do. I wasn't making the kind of changes that I thought I was meant to be making. And I saw that kids were getting better, but not really changing their lives. You know, that's what I came here to do, was to change lives. I was born a preemie, sent home in a shoebox to die. And, you know, the interesting thing is that my grandmother, who prayed me back to life, you know, one of those situations, said to me, you're alive and now it's your job to do something meaningful. And so working with children was where I thought I was going to pay back my debt to God for saving my life, that kind of thing, you know. And always loved the shoebox. You should see my shoe closet.
I can't relate. What is she? Who is she? Who is she talking?
Larry, stop watching.
I tell you. So I knew that I was supposed to do something important. That's what I was raised to do, right? And handing out pencil grips and teaching kids to tie their shoelaces and, you know, how to stab food with a fork, even though those things are important, don't get me wrong, it didn't satisfy that part of me that said I was supposed to do something bigger and more important. And I really thought time was running out and that God was going to get me. Let's get down to that. I was like, you know what? I'm disappointing God and he's going to just fall from the sky and snatch me up because I'm just wasting this life that he saved me for. And I got really concerned about that. So even though I was doing a lot of good work in New York, I was training therapists, I had a very thriving practice, like, you know, one of those best practices in New York City, you know, all the contracts and well-known. There was that thing inside of me that said, this is not it. So I really, besides the weather, I shut everything down to hide. I thought I was just gonna, that's why I'm in Davie, Florida. Like, you hide in Davie, okay?
This is where you come to die. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly. I mean, I moved from New York City.
Sorry, Davie.
I can't stop.
You're on a horse. Wait,
Listen here. It had to be, because, you know, I mean, I'm from the Caribbean. My husband is Dominican. We are like the quintessential New York hip couple, and we found ourselves in Southwest Ranches. Like, who the hell does that?
I'm right down the street in Pembroke Pines, so
I hear banjos.
Yeah. And I literally thought I was just going to go sit under a tree and die.
Oh my gosh. So tell us about founding Therapeeds, the birth of the H.O.P.E and Way. H.O.P.E stands for Harper's Optimal Protocol for Enrichment, and WAY stands for What About You? And for the sake of the podcast, and why am I reading your lines?
This is actually an intervention. Julie and I, we spoke beforehand, and we're hoping.
Let's start again.
We're hoping we can change your brain today, Brenda. So far, there's no hope. Big failure.
I was so excited. I would just jumped into Christy's question.
Why
I'll
not?
Just continue. You want to continue?
No, I do not.
Yes, please.
I had to put my glasses back on to do
Just
that.
be honest that
Yes.
you didn't even notice that it was your question.
Well,
I know you didn't
no,
even notice.
No, my finger was there.
Oh,
Because I
which
wasn't
finger?
allowed to.
Which finger? This finger? Which finger was there?
Wow. Well,
I had no coffee this morning.
The segue is interesting though because you stopped
That's
at
why.
Way. What about you? Yeah. What about Bren?
What about
what
you?
about you?
Continue,
and
please.
for the sake of our podcast, not that we can't all talk forever, we're going to focus.
Oh, wow.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to keep it within the realm of autism. She's crying. Okay, I have known her 11 and a half years, and she's cried laughing 5 times maybe. So this is so anyway, since we know that you offer
Back to our
services
guest.
for virtually everyone, back to you, Dr. Julia Harper. Tell us about your work with autism specifically.
Right. Okay. So we can talk about autism, but I gotta say that the work all starts with the word, the brain, right? Because, you know, whether we're talking about autism or anything else, we're talking about a brain. And ultimately what it came down to is, regardless of the diagnosis of the person who came in, and we all know autism is this big spectrum, right? From everything pervasive developmental disorder back in the day to Asperger's and high functioning autism now. What's true is that all of these diagnoses fit a spectrum of comorbidity. It all comes down to a brain that is structurally intact. As parents of children with autism, you have done the dance. You've gone to the neurologist who took the pictures, who did the CAT scan, and who said, everything is fine. Everything is perfect. And what are they saying? The structures of the brain is intact, right? So
And they're also saying come back in 6 months.
Exactly. Yeah, come back in 6 months.
Not that I know anything about that.
Take a look again and tell you that everything is structurally fine. And here's the weird part. You're like, okay, everything is structurally is structurally fine. Everything is intact. But why the hell is my kid not doing this, that, or the other? So ultimately what it comes down to is we're dealing with an intact brain. We're dealing with a brain that is taking in information information perfectly fine because, again, you know this to be true. People with the autistic spectrum disorder, they can see, they can hear, smell, taste, touch, and move. So they're taking in all the information. The brain is designed to process sensation. That's all it does, okay? It processes sensation. Nobody questions that. Your digestive system processes food. Your respiratory system processes air. What does your brain do? It processes sensation. So everything you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and move, all of that is going directly to your brain to be processed. At the end of the day, it's a system. Information goes in. The system has to use the information, and you should get an output. And what happens is when the output is faulty, depending upon which groups of output is faulty, it's going to get a name. And a name that ranges everything from autistic spectrum disorder to developmental delays to learning disabilities. There's a comorbidity, and the comorbidity is this. We have an intact brain, we have intact structure, we have faulty output. And so specifically to the issue of autism, the question then becomes, well, what's going on? It's that processing that's faulty. It's what I say all the time. Everyone with an autistic spectrum disorder diagnosis has a processing disorder, but not everyone with a processing disorder is autistic.
Let me process that.
We're definitely in there somewhere.
I'm going to have to play that back a few times because I could barely understand that sentence, but I get it.
But you know what? I'm understanding this one better than the other one we did. You know, the other podcast.
Yes. Sidebar later.
I'm following this one just fine.
Who has a processing disorder is autistic, because the only thing a processing disorder means is that the brain isn't using the information or processing the information well. That's what it means. I usually use the analogy of an iPhone, and I say, think of it this way. The structures of your iPhone is fine. You just bought yourself a wonderful 10S, but you got a iOS 3. So the software is faulty. Mm-hmm. And so even though the phone is great and it looks perfect, if they didn't load the right software into the phone, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. Okay, so ultimately what we're dealing with is we don't have the apps coming out, right? We don't have the output. We don't have good motor skills. Mm-hmm. We don't have good learning skills, cognitive skills, thinking skills. We don't have good social emotional skills. And we don't have good communication skills. Those are the 4 skill sets that the brain produces. Motor skills, communication skills, cognitive skills, and social emotional skills. When your brain is working, when information is going in, when it's being processed properly, and you get the appropriate output, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get intact motor, cognitive, communication, and social emotional skills. How do we know our brains are not working? 1 or 2 or 3 or all 4 of those are messed up. It's the brain saying, I'm not doing my job. That's the bottom line. So I don't have my processing, my wiring is faulty. It's saying I have the structure, I don't have the software to communicate within and between myself to give you the output that you need. So ultimately, if we come back to this, neuroplasticity is about saying, let's figure out why the wiring is faulty, where it's faulty. That's most important. Where is it faulty? And how do we rewire the brain to make better connections? So you asked the question about the H.O.P.E method. That's what it is. The H.O.P.E method is about staying away from looking at just the outputs. Because when we look at the outputs, it's like going to the doctor and saying, I have a fever, I have a cough, I have a sneeze, and I have a tickly throat. Exactly. Exactly. And the doctor gives you a medication for each of those things. I love it, right? you get a treatment for each of those symptoms, but he never freaking told you, you got a flu. Let's treat your flu. Yeah. It's the same thing. For me, traditional therapy, and, respectfully, I say it, and it has its place. Another time we could talk about the place for it. Mm-hmm. It has its place, but traditional therapy teaches us to look at the symptoms. It says your kid can't write, teach them how to write. Your kid can't talk, get them a speech therapist. Your kid can't walk, go to a physical therapist. It's all talking about what the outputs are, the symptoms are, and this is why parents go crazy, because
they're a Band-Aid on something and not necessarily.
Absolutely, and you spend so much money running around, money, time, energy, effort. And I'm going to say this one, the most expensive thing that parents waste is hope. That's what parents waste, because by the time they get to me, they're hopeless. They run out of money, they run out of time, and they think that there's nothing that can help their children, really help their children.
Run out of energy.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Run out of stress in their marriage. I mean, there's stress in the marriage, there's money, there's, I'm preaching to the choir here, so I'm not even going to get into that. But at the end of the day, most times when parents come to us, listen, I didn't name it the H.O.P.E method. I got that name from the parents. Because ultimately, when I started to explain how the brain works and the fact that the brain, neuroplasticity is available and possible to rewire the brain, just the understanding of that, parents said to me, "You've given me hope." That was it. That was it. And they gave me the name, and I just stuck with it. So that's HOPE. That's how we got the name HOPE. And ultimately, what HOPE is about going into the brain and finding out what is the cause of the problem. You know, it's like somebody telling you that your child has a processing disorder is telling you that you have a brain problem. Big whoop. You haven't given me much information here, right? Mm-hmm. Sure, Sherlock, right?
Thanks for that.
Exactly. But I always say to people, think of it this way. If a doctor tells you you have cancer, what's the first question you ask? Where? Why? Because you need to know what type of cancer it is so that you know what intervention to use, because not all interventions are the same. And that's why parents also lose hope, because they're not coming from the perspective of the location of the problem. They're trying to treat the symptom. And that's why people ask the question and they say, how come this worked for this one and how come that worked for that one? It comes down to where in the brain. It's like you can't treat all the cancers the same. If you know exactly what type of cancer you have, then you can choose the specific protocol to match that cancer. How I treat lung cancers and how I'm going to treat prostate cancer. There's even different protocols for different types of breast cancer, right? So if you think of it, the brain is complex. You can't just say, oh, one size fits all. I told you all, I grew up with my grandmother. She has a saying, everything good for something, nothing good for everything. Right? So one of the things we do here at Therapeeds, and the HOPE method is about having a lot of tools. I call this place the Home Depot of therapy. We have tons of tools here, but parents don't come in here and ask us and tell us what tools they want. Hell no. I'm sorry, I'm going to be respectful. I know your parents. I'm going to respect that you're parents. You don't know the brain. You don't know what tool is for what. You don't go to your doctor and while you're in the middle of surgery say, I think you should use that scalpel. You don't, right?
I might. That's just me.
Right? And you go to a wonderful restaurant, you don't go back and tell the chef how much you know what to cook. You get the meal and you enjoy it.
I would never.
You know, and if a chef allowed you to, they should they should kick you out of the kitchen. So we have a lot of tools here, but when parents come, what we respectfully say is, allow us to identify what your child needs, when, so that we can create the just right protocol for your child. It isn't that any tool is bad, like everything is good for something, but not everything is good. Nothing is good for everything. Penicillin is an awesome drug, but if you have a different bug, you need a different antibiotic.
And that's a whole new source of frustration from parents. Is that, well, she did this.
We've
talked about her. We talk about it all the time with her child, and nothing for mine. And it just
and there's a reason why it worked for that child and a reason why it wouldn't work for yours. Or maybe there may be a different time for that to work for your child. I tell people building a brain is like building a house. You don't hire the roofing contractors until you dig a good foundation. You know, because if you put the roof before you get the foundation, or there's stuff going on in the walls, then even if you have the best roof, then you're going to have to repay for it at a later date because it just wasn't the right timing. So the HOPE method specifically is about where in the brain is the problem, what specific interventions do you need at that particular time, what order do you need to use those interventions in, and most importantly, what specific outcome am I looking for, right? Because every area of the brain is responsible for giving you a particular outcome. So you have to know what you're looking for. That way you can have a good measure of, this is what I did, this is what I'm expecting, and then what's the next thing that I do? So when you hire somebody to dig your foundation, you don't come to the foundation guy and say, oh, what happened to my roof? He's going to tell you, no, look down here, you hired me to do the foundation. Did you get a good foundation? Yes. Okay, now it's time for the next step. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally.
You know?
We're very blonde.
So blonde.
And we get it.
So much
which
blonde.
means everybody else.
It's a good day in Davie, y'all.
Yeah. Hey. Yeehaw!
Audio waves going
Go
off
for
the
it.
charts.
Yes. I gotta film that because it's like,
awesome. Which is there a type of child that it benefits, or how young? I guess I'll rephrase. How young can a child be to begin treatment? Is there an age? Like, is there a?
Yeah. So first of all, we have a program here called How to Keep Your Child Away from Me. Let's start that off. And that program starts as early as 6 weeks. And it's for a child as young as 6 weeks. Any child under a year old from 6 weeks under a year old can walk into the center and be screened.
They can't walk into the center.
And if they can be brought into the center, thank you for that, and be screened for free. Okay, and the reason I created that program, How to Keep Your Child Away From Me, is literally for that reason. Keep your freaking children away from me. And what does that mean? It means if we can find the challenges early, if we can find the glitches in the central nervous system early, I may be able to say, here, do this, do that. There are a few things that parents can change, really, to help support the development of the brain. You know, when people ask what creates a processing disorder, it's a combination of genetics and epigenetics. So genetics, you know, it's what you're born with, is the raw material. I always tell moms, I wasn't there when you chose your husband, blame him, right? But
blame the husband on
always.
It's Larry's fault.
Yes. However, epigenetics, and this is the part, you know, that I studied a lot for my PhD, is what are the factors that turn on or off the expression of a gene. And if we look at the current neuroscience literature that's out there around autistic spectrum disorder and many of these kinds of disorders, what we talk about is that they can't locate any specific set of genes, that there are too many of them, and that ultimately what neuroscience is saying is that there are multiple factors that are turning on the expression of those genes. And so we have to be aware of what those factors are. So epigenetically, there are things that we're doing, and there's a range of them. I mean, that's a whole other podcast we could have a conversation about, okay? A whole bunch of them. However, guess what's one of the number one epigenetic factors? And I must say it, it's sad to say, but I must say it, it's maternal stress. It's maternal stress. More than any of the other things that we read about. You could talk about food, and again, we have a nutritionist on site here, so it's not that I shy away from any of these things. We could talk about food, and we could talk about vaccinations, and we could talk about 10,000 other things, multiple of them which add to it. But the number one toxin to the brain is maternal stress. Okay? And so that brings us to the WAVE program. What about you? Because at the end of the day, it's not even about your external stress, because right, the easiest thing you could say is, okay, well then control my stress. Duh. Are you alive? That's not possible, right? You know, what the studies show is not the actual stress that's going on. We now know that even though we are in a less stressful situation, we experience more stress because of what's called perceived stress. Right? So it's not about what's actually going on outside of us, it's what's going on inside of us. It's what's going on inside of our heads that are creating stressful events that release stressful neurochemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, and those are the chemicals that create the toxicity that affect the brain the most. It crosses into the baby's neurological system and affects the baby. And so we are in a world where, you know, I'm a woman, I have 2 children. This is life, right? And I remember back in the day when autism first came around, they used to say it was a cold mother, and I used to get so
refrigerator mom.
Right? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I used to get so pissed because I used to say, oh, blame it on the mother, of course, right? Refrigerator mom. And now, you know, after I did my research, I was so angry when I saw that, you know, it was maternal stress. That was a big factor. I'm like, shit, back to the mother. You know, that's why I blame the genetics on the dad all the time, right? Somebody, we gotta share this stuff.
But I think you described my experience.
Yes.
You really, really did. A lot of people ask, did you have postpartum? Did you have this? I'm like, no, but something was going on, and it's, I don't want to say funny, ironic, interesting, that I was so worried that something was going to happen to my baby. So then when something did happen to my baby, imagine.
Yeah. So this is why we have the WAVE program. It's called What About You? And ultimately, that program came out of my PhD because there was no theory in the literature to support the experience of what it is to become a mother of a child with special needs. Nothing. I mean, there were tons of parenting studies out there, tons of parenting theories, but the phenomena of becoming a parent of a child with special needs wasn't studied. And what was out there was horrific. It talked about, you know, you just basically are stressed, you're miserable, you get divorced, you lose money, and then you die. And so it was actually talk about no hope, right? The only thing you found was gloom and doom. And so my PhD is in psychology, and I studied in the School of Positive Psychology. And I just have to say, all right, for the record, I do not like positive people. Okay, let's just get clear here.
We don't like people.
I can't stand positive people.
How many times a day do I text Brenda, I hate everyone?
Yes, exactly. You know.
In more colorful words.
Yes. So this isn't about positivity and put a happy spin on it. I hate that nonsense. Positive psychology is not about positivity. Positive psychology is about resilience
And action.
It's about resilience. It's about how does a human being, it's the study of the brain and the mind of a human being who's gone through hell and still comes out on the other side of it better for having the experience. So it studies people like Nelson Mandela, who the entire country is miserable and he comes out smelling, like talking about peace and love, or Gandhi, or Elie Wiesel, who was in Auschwitz and comes out talking about, I must help my brother. You know, you see crazy people like that and you're like, whatever drug they're on, I want some of that, right? So that's actually why I study positive psychology, because I'm like, how do you go through such devastating experiences and still come out better for it? And the reason I went there is because having a child with special needs is freaking traumatizing. Again,
And having two?
traumatizing.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the research says that mothers, you're going to appreciate this, you might have heard it already,
Yes.
mothers of children with special needs have as much stress chemistry as a combat soldier. We've heard it, right?
And
So-
they keep redoing that same study and publishing it all over Facebook.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, that's like from 2011. Like,
Right, but they
people-
say
we
over
know
and
that
over.
part.
But what I'm saying
We
is,
get it, we get it.
you get it, you experience it, you live it. Okay, but getting it doesn't mean anything unless you realize that you got to do something about it. Get it? Yes, it's a wonderful piece of information. What are
Now
you
what?
doing?
Yes.
Now what?
Now what?
So that's what the WAY method is about. It's about the now what do you do with that piece of information? Because you're living in hell and you're living in stress. And here's another piece of information for you. The 93% of parents of children with special needs fail. 93%. Okay?
Fail that.
Fail at parenting.
At life?
Well, fail at parenting.
At parenting,
Well,
okay.
okay. So we have a 7% success rate of being able to raise children successfully and having positive parenting experiences. 93% have negative parenting behaviors and fail at raising successful, whole, healthy children. I mean, outside of the disability, we're just talking about their emotional stability and development. So when I saw that number, 93% failure rate, 7% success rate, of course initially I got pissed off, you know, because my reaction to everything initially is pissed off, right?
We can't relate. She.
In case you haven't gotten that yet.
Christy and I are so positive.
Yeah.
I don't understand any of this.
So, you know, initially I got pissed off, but pissed off always works for me because pissed off gets me to think, what the hell am I going to do about it? And the
That
next
is true. It's a great motivation.
Yeah,
It
and
can
then
be.
the next thing I thought was if 7% can do it, then 10 can, and then 15 can, and then 20 can, because we're going to do something about that 7%. And so we created this method called the WAY method, What About You? And it's a method by which we created strategies to allow parents to become more aware and also develop specific skills around parenting successfully and becoming different human beings. Because it's necessary. It's necessary. Neuroplasticity says that not only can the brain change, but the environment in which the brain functions has to change as well. And what we saw is that we were changing the brains of children, but if we didn't change the minds of the parents,
Right, because then they go home and it's all
you got me, girl. You got
Yeah.
me. So that's what WAY came about to be. WAY was about, I'm over here killing myself trying to change your kids.
Continue.
You got to
Mhm.
change too.
Yeah.
You got to change too. So that's why at Therapeeds it's about the H.O.P.E and WAY method. H.O.P.E is about rewiring the brain, and WAY is about rewiring the mind.
Hello, Facebook. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Nice to see you. We're not having any fun at all. Terrible, terrible time. We are in Davie recording,
Yeehaw. Oh, well.
with Dr. Julia Harper, and we are live on Facebook.
Hey, hey, Facebook.
So right now we just stopped recording. You'll see us start. We're recording and then we stop and then we chit chat and then we go back again. So send us questions. Bye. Julie Hornock is watching. Yes, we like Julie. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Sharon. Okay.
Should my social media person link in with you guys or
I've
no?
never done the dual
Yeah, it's all good.
But it'll probably be saved on
Saved,
to
and
that,
you can
and then you
grab
can,
it.
and I'll
Yeah.
tag,
Yeah.
I can tag, and then you can
Yeah.
share, and all the wonderful social media. You know, something like the little, I don't know, from like a con.
That's what happens when I take my glasses on. Okay,
So did I cover it for you, Mama?
I think that's good. Yeah. You don't have to do any of these. It's just if you
No,
find that
no.
it's a natural next
But I
question.
just want to
you
make
can.
sure,
But,
keeping the
yeah.
focus on autism. Do you want to skip that? Do you
Yeah,
want to go to ASD adults?
Well, that was my question that I already
Oh.
asked, and I skipped it. I skipped that part.
Oh, that's
I
fine.
said the how young. I didn't want to talk about that.
Do you want to do the
The
general
adults?
intake?
Well, adult, you don't want.
I just said that, adults.
Yeah.
What about ASD adults?
Yeah.
Do you want me to
Yeah.
go there?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. No. So,
Do you mean adults or young adults?
sure. Young adults, because they're adult children, like mine.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, Brandon, social media king.
Long time no see. All right. Okay. Back to us.
Back to us.
Just kidding.
Who does she think she is?
I know. Does she own the place?
I don't know.
Oh, man, she's annoying. Anyway, talk to us about the young adult ASD individuals. What changes, and this is purely selfish on our
Yes.
part,
Yeah.
what changes have you experienced in that, or positivity have you experienced in that population with your methods?
So this is actually a big passion of mine at this point, young adults, because the reality of it is when the kids are younger and they're struggling in school, they get attention, right? We all know that. And then there's this stage where people either run out of money or they say they aged out, and then you have these kids that are just kind of floating around life trying to figure out, what do I do next? And part of what happened when I built the center and we built the second floor was my mind was tracking for those adolescents that I saw really struggling. Ultimately, what it comes down to is a functionality. And so the brain science around autistic spectrum disorder is they're left brain biased, right? We know that. There's a tendency to overuse left brain strategies to be able to understand and process the world, which is great, fine, that's clear, that's what the science is telling us. However, for you to be functional in life, you have to have a right brain partner so that you get context. And it's why you see so many challenges with the autistic spectrum individual around things like judgment, decision making, problem solving, real life decisions. So, we created a program here called Now What? It's literally for that.
It's so funny, when you said that a little while ago, I was going to joke, well, your next program is going to be called Now What?
Yeah, that is actually what we have. It's
That's
called Now What? Because it's exactly for this issue of, we've done all of this therapy and now what? And it's why I partnered with H.O.P.E as well, because, I went to their fundraiser, we donate to them frequently. I love that organization. H.O.P.E?
Oh, H.O.P.E,
Yes.
yeah.
I love that organization, but I was sitting there listening to them and they were talking about job placement and very proud they were doing awesome work. And then I was like, can I ask, what happens when, now that they have the job, if there's a girl they want to talk to, or the Uber they called didn't show up, or the train that you taught them to take gets stuck, when life
goes out
of the norm, of the pattern,
ABC,
right?
right,
Exactly.
yeah.
When life just hits them, what happens next? And they were like, and I said, we have to get there. We have to, we have to get to the point where we teach decision making, problem solving, judgment, sex, money. These are real life things. We can't just think about, get them employed and get them to work, because that's left brain training, and a lot of that it's complex, but truly that's the low-hanging fruit in the autistic spectrum population. Meaning, you teach them something that's a left brain skill, they're gonna get it. They're smart. They're gonna get it. For middle to high functioning kids with autism. But the more subtle things like, when this person comes to talk to me, are they telling me a joke? Are they going to take advantage of me? Is this really my friend? Even going to college, being able to pick up on those subtleties, that requires right brain skills. It's why so many of our autistic spectrum kids have trouble with reading comprehension and social subtle cues, right? It's about those right brain skills that are not naturally developed. So the Now What program is about addressing that. Building a right brain is so much harder than building a left brain, because our natural teaching skills are to do left. What's left brain teaching? It's details, it's breaking it down into sequences, it's this step, that's, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. It's a fish to water for an autistic spectrum person. It's
And
easy
that's always
learning.
my fear when you know, people try to put a band-aid on going back to that, on
Yes.
my feelings or my fears, and you know, when I say, oh, but he might be able to get a job doing this, and I'm like, I know he could probably do that.
Sure.
That is
It's
not
not
my
the
fear.
fear.
He's at public. Someone's bullying him. He's not going to understand someone's bullying him.
Exactly.
And I'm always, not to be negative Nelly, but to me, it's the
That's the real
reality.
life. That's a real life.
So I'm like, what do I get about feeling good about, oh, my son got a job, stop doing this, and I'm like, right, but he's also going to be the one in the news that he got picked on? No.
There's so few variables within that. Okay, now you're sitting here, you're going to do this, and then you're going to do that. Yes, they get that.
Yes.
Because they're bright.
That's the
But
left
it's
side.
the part of
It's
the world
judgment side.
that is changing and things are thrown at
That's
you.
what kills me.
It's
You know, when
difficult.
people just, it's almost like they want to do it to like build themselves up and feel good about themselves, and
Yes.
I'm like, but I can't, I would be so worried.
And that's what I always talk about. It's the teaching of skill. When you focus primarily on left brain teaching a skill, that's for the adults around the person. My child can and I can. Who the hell cares what the hell you could do? You're functional. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
So what we focus on here is process, not product. Left brain is product oriented.
Okay.
My child can say these words, they can do this math problem. Process is right brain oriented. Do you know how to do that? Is it replicable? Right? Do you know how to do it in context?
Throw this variable in.
Then what?
How to change it. It's a process. So we teach the process of decision making. We teach the process of context. We teach the process of problem solving. There are different levels of problems that need to be solved, from concrete problems to abstract problems. It's a range of things. And so that's where my passion is, because I just see this overemphasis. I'm like, there's tons of people out there already doing the left brain stuff, right? And I see this overemphasis on product and getting skills into these kids. And I think, okay, and then what? Because I see these kids and they have left brain skills developed, they can get into college, but then no right brain skills and they don't know how to use it. And the gap between the left and the right is widening and widening and widening and widening.
And the parent over here, parent over here, I am constantly solving my son's problems. I'm protecting him from the world because it's my natural, just
Yep.
tendency.
Absolutely.
And I know every time, whether it's helping him tie his shoe or whatever it is, I want to, and I think it's natural to take away if I take away all the barriers of things that could possibly go wrong, then he can focus on, but it's not the best of, it's in our nature, but I get it. It's not the best approach.
Well, it isn't. It's not only not the best approach. It's actually a dysfunctional approach.
It's detrimental.
And I have
to their
say that's
development.
what the WAY program. That's why it partners with the H.O.P.E model, because we have to titrate the level of problem you can expose your child to, with you being able to watch them experience that problem.
Like this. Not
Yes.
Like this.
No, right. I mean, one of the biggest jobs we have is grabbing hold of mom's hands and going, you stand here and you shut the hell up.
Oof, that would be hard for us.
I don't know what that means.
Okay. Really? I mean,
Do we know how to shut up?
Yeah. You don't, right? You definitely don't. And I say that as a mother. I mean, I have a 22-year-old and a 16-year-old, and watching my own 16-year-old sometimes struggle and biting through my tongue and realizing that the work is mine to do. Because the biggest problem we have as parents is we get in our kids' way. Okay? And the truth of it is our job is to let life touch them. If we don't let life touch them, we're not preparing them for life. Punto ya.
Yeah. I am curious about the logistics involved in a sample session. Obviously, we're familiar with techniques used in ABA, speech therapy, and OT. What are some of the approaches involved in, say, a sample session with a child with limited eye contact and significant stimming and scripting?
Oh, that was a question? Okay.
Yes.
So what you just did was give me a question about symptoms, which is absolutely not what we do. So the interesting thing about that question is that It's not a question that I could really answer, because what you just did was list a bunch of symptoms for me, and that's not how we function. The first thing I would say is I would have to find out where in the brain is this child's breakdown, and then based on that, we then determine what interventions we need and what tools we would use. Because why one child doesn't have eye contact and scripting is different for another, and it's all based on where they are in the brain. So our interventions are brain-based, they're not symptom-based, and that's the reason why I can't necessarily answer.
So if you have a child that you're, to try and just, I guess, dumb it down for listeners to understand what would happen. So obviously you have an intake, you have a whole process, which we'll talk about.
Right.
How, if you can't get them to come and sit, and I know it's a symptom, but like what is like,
but again, it would be why. You see, that's the problem that we're having in this communication, because I could have, okay, we're going to talk about it from a brain perspective, right? There are different areas of the brain that's responsible for different things. So the first part of the brain is the medulla, the low brain stem. This is really dumbing it down, which means that I have a kid who can't just deal with the world and the environment as it is. And that could be one of the reasons why they're not sitting. So when I have a problem at level 1 of the brain and the person can't relate to the world, then my focus is to do intervention to get their brainstem to be able to receive information and not be so overwhelmed or underwhelmed by it. See, because that part of the brain says I either am connected to the world or I'm disconnected to the world. And I'm disconnected either because the world is too much or it's not enough. So what we focus on there is helping that part of the brain be able to just deal with information coming in so that the person can sit and interact and relate to the world, right? And that would include interventions such as occupational therapy, sound intervention, nutritional interventions. We deal with sleep, we deal with diet, we deal with everything that just feeds the brain so that that brain is at a place where you can allow the child just to be okay in the environment.
It's time to discuss something super important. Let's talk about Anchor, the easiest way to make a free podcast. Their creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you so that it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app, that's ANCHOR, or go to anchor.fm to get started.
so the treatment itself, it's as a whole, so it's a combination of everything.
Everything.
And obviously it changes per child.
Per child. Can I just give you a second example,
Of
though?
course.
Because we could have a child who has a problem at level 2 of the brain, upper brainstem and cerebellum, just as a big picture. That child is probably not sitting down because their cerebellum, which is the part of the brain that's the brake system, isn't working for them. So they're pinging around the room, right? So for that child, their not sitting is very different from the first child not sitting. And so my intervention for the second child who's not sitting is to stimulate the cerebellum, to do activities that actually cause that part of the brain to develop so that they learn to inhibit their bodies and control their bodies. That person may also have occupational therapy, physical therapy, nutrition, speech, sound intervention, but what we do with them at that level of the brain is going to look very different than what we do with the child whose problem is at the first level of the brain. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So what happens in say the cerebellum activation room?
Okay, so that is actually a proprietary intervention that we created here at Therapeeds, where we use resistance and specific movements in different directions to activate the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the inhibitor. So what we're doing is we're firing up the brakes. So think of it this way. It's like being able to pump the brakes on your car. Imagine you were driving down the road, right? And there was a kid in front of you. You see this kid coming out in front of you and you're barreling down the road, and then you step on your brake and the brake is gone. What would happen? You have to stop that car. So what do you need to do? You either ram that car into a tree or a wall because it has to be stopped, right? That's basically what we do with the cerebellum activation room. No, we're not ramming people's children into trees and cars. No, what we're doing is we're stimulating that part of the brain so that the brain learns to stop. okay? Because this is what causes kids to not have good body control. This is what's having your kid fidgeting. They can't sit still. They can't hold themselves up. They're leaning on the wall all the time. They're touching everything all the time. They're moving. The cerebellum is the primary inhibitor. And so if I don't get those nerves to get activated, it's not telling your body, stop.
And how do you stimulate?
So we stimulate it again by specific movements, by activities that facilitate resistance, by working on certain strengthening activities, but it's all about the direction of movement, the speed of the movement, the level of resistance, and it's specific to every kid. The interesting thing about Therapeeds is that it really is about making sure that not only do we know where in the brain the breakdown is happening for the child, it's that every intervention is individualized for the child, simply because what your cerebellum needs and what mine needs are two different things. It's like an appetite, right? So we know in general that the cerebellum, from neuroscience, we know that the cerebellum is responsible for resistance. We know it's responsible for rhythm and timing. We know that it's responsible for speed. We know that it's responsible when you move in certain directions. So we take those general concepts of what activates the cerebellum and we tweak it using activity that incorporates all of those things. So you may find that we're using music that has a lot of bass in it, specifically because bass stimulates.
I'm already doing that.
Yeah,
so
right?
I'm good.
You know?
You should see me in carpool.
Exactly, right? And that, and you know what? Believe it or not, there's a reason why you move when you have all that bass. It's because it's actually hitting that part of the brain and it makes your body move.
And that is why I like bass.
There you go, baby.
Miami
It's all about that
right?
bass.
Right?
All about that bass.
Yeah, so it's, you know, so in any given session you would see and again, we use, if you come into therapies, there's always music blasting, and it's a live music, and so you'll see anything from music being used to them being use resistive bands, to them using weights, to them moving in different directions, being crashed, pulled, thrown, because depending upon which trajectory they move, it'll activate different levels of cerebellum.
Awesome. And what about transcranial magnetic stimulation? And, well, I have a follow-up question about that. I was going to say, how do you get, I mean, because I know a little bit about it, but I want our listeners to know, but how do you get a child who's not willing, like sensory-wise, to go through it?
So
that's like a two-part question.
Yeah, it's a two-part question, but the first part of that question is, where in the brain does that intervention hit? I'm going to go back to my grandmother. Everything good for something, nothing good for everything, right? So transcranial magnetic stimulation, just listen to it, it's transcranial, and it's stimulating the cortex, the top of the brain, level 4. Okay, let's start there. So let's begin with, does this child's problem start there? Should I be doing cortical intervention with a kid whose problem is probably lower? So there's probably a reason why he's not sitting. He probably has a problem at level 1 or level 2 of the brain, which, by the way, transcranial magnetic stimulation does not hit. You cannot stimulate the subcortical regions of the brain. The level of electrical activity you would need would actually fry the brain. So that type of intervention, it's wonderful. Again,
Yes.
Nothing is wrong with it, but it is for somebody who needs intervention at the higher levels, level 4, level 3, potentially. If your kid is below there and you do it, you will not get the result.
Which is why there's centers that only advertise that treatment. So like you're saying, you're going to go to OT, but maybe you don't need OT. Maybe you need a little bit more of, a combination of things. So if a center only advertises as doing the transcranial stimulation, you go in and your child is not ready
for it, and it doesn't work for that child, but it doesn't mean that the intervention itself is bad, right? It's a good intervention for the person that it can hit. But again, we have people in the world that are toolless, right? There's a saying, if I have a hammer, the world is a nail. So if all I do is transcranial stimulation, then everybody should come and do this, right? Or if I'm a cranial sacral therapist, or I am a myofascial therapist, or I'm a blah, blah, blah. I tell people all the time, I'm one of the most certified therapists under the sun. I call myself certifiable because I get a whole bunch of different certifications. And the reason I do that is I hunt tools down. I really, really do. I'm into tools. I love them. The question that I have every single time I hear about a tool is this: who's it for and when? That's my question. It's not whether the tool is good or not. It's who's it for and when. Fast forward, we use it, great tool. Not for everybody, not all the time. Therapeutic listening, we have it. Not for everybody, not all the time. You name a tool.
God, neurofeedback, we have it. Not for everybody, not all the time. Any tool, not for everybody, not all the time. Punto, ya.
On your website, because some of us do our homework, you mentioned behavior modification approaches. And from the language, from our perspective, we hear, we think behavior modification, ABA. Yeah. Tell us how your approach differs from that.
Okay, so again, we go back to this idea of, brain-based intervention, right? And for what we see is that when there is a disruption in the brain function, number one thing that happens is that the brain has to compensate. We're human beings, we're adaptable. So the brain compensates. So I'll go back to the example of having a problem at level 2 of the brain. What it creates is something called a self-regulation dysfunction. Okay, so the upper brainstem and the cerebellum is what allows me to be able to develop my skills, be able to adapt to the environment, and to be able to adapt to life in general. That's the function of those two levels of the brain, those two structures at that level of the brain. And so what we see when someone has a problem at that area is they can't adapt to the world as it comes. They can't persist. They have difficulty with adjusting to the environment as it exists. They have difficulty with using their skills consistently. So you see skills when they're at home and they're in a comfortable environment, you see a lot higher skills than you see if you go out into a different environment. Or you see inconsistency in skills. So you say, I know my kid could do this. Why isn't he doing it there? Right? So you know that. So at the end of the day, what happens then is when I am not adapting to the world, I create certain behaviors around it. Some of those behaviors include rigidity. Some of those behaviors include controlling the world, because if I can't control myself, I will control you. Okay, that's really what it comes down to. Yeah. So some of the controlling behaviors that we see, controlling behaviors around food, around clothes, around things that are supposedly they can or cannot do, we do testing to see, is this something that really, there is neuroscience where there's a basis where I cannot handle it. You know, that's at level 1 of the brain. I cannot handle this information. And then there's level 2 of the brain. I don't like to handle it. So there's a difference between I cannot versus I don't like to. Okay? So I'll give you a concrete example of it. At level 1 of the brain, there is in existence auditory defensiveness. We actually have audiologists on site. We measure it. It is because there's a reflex, a structure in your ear that has to close up your inner ear to allow you to protect your inner ear from sound. If that structure isn't working for you, then when sound comes, it pours in and you experience it as noxious. You with me? Mm-hmm. So that's literally the child cannot handle sound, right? So when we see that present, this kid, hearing a toilet flush or experiencing certain sounds, they're gonna experience it as noxious and painful. Mm-hmm. However, at level 2 of the brain, now if we test them, we see that structure is intact for them, it's working. At level 2 of the brain, they may not have that problem where physiologically they can't handle sound. It may be that they just don't like it. So there's a difference between I physiologically can't do it versus I don't like it. Sometimes it might be because they have had an experience in the past where they used to not be able to handle the sound, and now in their minds they think I cannot, so they're stuck, right? So in that situation, this isn't I can't, this is I won't. And so now what we have to do is help this person to understand that at the level of behavior, not at physiology, you're having a challenge. Do you understand? It's, I've dealt with, for instance, a kid not wanting to sing happy birthday or not wanting to wait. We had a girl who came to us from Colorado. She only wore one dress and no underwear. And she actually ended up leaving school because she just couldn't wear clothes all the time. And this mother brought this child from Colorado to see us. excuse my French, her ass was hanging out. Now you have to know this mother is desperate if she's dragging her kid across the country through airports with her ass hanging out.
We've gone.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, you can relate, right?
Yeah.
And so this little girl, we checked, and this little, besides not wearing clothes, she was punching holes in the wall, and she
I know
was,
several
and
cases like that.
and she was extremely rigid. She was telling her family what temperature the car had to be, what radio station they had to play. They completely she controlled everything in her environment. We worked with her in behavior modification because her problem was not at level 1 of the brain where she couldn't handle the things. Her problem was at level 2 of the brain where she couldn't adapt to changes, right? So we worked with her on adaptability, and part of what we did was use behavior to help her to adapt. We worked on her brain being able to stop herself, be able to control her body, cerebellum, control myself, control my body, control my own emotions, as well as at the same time having her understand and experience that it was not about that she couldn't do it, but that she didn't want to. I had another little boy from Maryland who came to see me. He sent his parents crazy because every time they went to the gas tank, the gas pump, he told them they had to pay with a credit card so that he could see the exact number on the gas tank, right? And when they were driving to us, the father paid with cash, and this child had a 3-hour meltdown in the car because he paid with cash. I took that kid to the gas station myself.
Let me handle this one.
Yeah.
I think you're confusing island raising.
Yeah.
I only say that because my mom would be like,
Give him to me.
No,
I'm kidding.
I was like, listen here, baby, we're gonna do
Listen,
this.
I feel you. Remember when there was like a time where you always had to sign for everything when you use a credit card, but now if it's like under $50, they're like, yeah, have a nice day.
Yeah.
The day the JR could stop signing for me, forget. Huge meltdown.
This is what I'm saying, and that's adaptability, and this is what I'm talking about. I mean, I wrote about one of these kids in the blog. A mom brought her 15-year-old son here. According to her, he was addicted to Coca-Cola. Literally, she said he was addicted to Coca-Cola, so much so that she couldn't take him out because he would go to other people's tables and drink their sodas, okay? So she brings him here. Again, his problem was at level 2, adaptation. You know what the problem was? He couldn't hear the word no. That's really what it came down to. She was afraid to say no to him. I took this kid to, kid huge. I went to Target, took my earrings off because I'm ready to rumble on the floor with the whole box, and you and me, this is going down.
We're gonna do this,
right? I go to Target ready to have the battle with him. We go in front of the Coke machine, the refrigerator. He asked me for the Coke. I say no. He looks at me. I'm like, what? He looked at me, it was fine. So much so, I made him take out a Coke, give it to me. I made him give everybody in the store Coke. He put Coke in the cart. He put it back in. He did everything. His mother was sitting there looking at me like I was this crazy magician. I said, no, all I said was no. Then he's leaving, and she says, what do I do? He asked her Coke for the Coke, and she goes, what do I do? And I said, did you not just see what I did? Oh my God. Just do what I did. She goes, what do? I said, say no, right? And she looks at me, and then she looks at him, and she goes, no, I almost killed her. Because no and no I.
It's two different things.
I'm like, are you an idiot?
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I said, no. Because first of all, no I, there's none.
Right.
It's crazy. I said, you're lying to the
Right.
kid. He's not
Yeah.
a fool. He sees the plastic Coke right there. How the hell could you say no I?
Right.
But it was impossible for her to just say no. She had been so afraid of his meltdowns.
Yes,
Natural.
Like I'm currently, and I'm guilty of some of that some of the time, but I also know that I'm aware of what I'm doing, and I'm just choosing to continue with my day and deal with it. Sometimes I have the patience to do it, to just deal with the meltdown and ignore it or whatever. But then some other times I'm like, I don't care. But so I always say I'm choosing my battles. But now on the way home, Oliver my little one chooses a DVD. Dylan allows him, this is huge, he's finally allowing him to choose a DVD. We put it on, but Dylan knows these DVDs by heart. So he'll say, chapter 7. So I would give Oliver a chance. He could watch a couple of chapters. And then because I know we're getting home and Dylan likes the closure, I would fast forward to 7 so that Dylan could get his closure, and then we all happy family go into the house. But then Oliver started getting upset because Oliver wanted to watch the whole thing. So I said, this is wrong, and I'm enabling this behavior. So se acabó. No
Right.
no more chapter 7.
No
all that.
hay.
So now, so now every afternoon it's World War III because but he learned really quick because he starts. Mommy, he doesn't have a whole lot of language, but he has some, and he uses all of it. Mommy, faster. Mommy, fast forward. And I said, so I'm very clear. Nope, not today. Today we're gonna watch the entire video. And I'm like. Just right.
And the modification isn't just about having the child be modified, but the parent be modified,
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm
So
perfect.
you got to work your way through
That's
all
the only
of
time
it,
I've ever done it. Okay. No.
you know, and helping the parents learn
Right.
how to stick with it, stick through this process.
But sometimes Oliver's not crying, and I'm like, I just want to get home.
Right.
I'm like, yes,
Right.
here's chapter 7. I don't care.
And I have
But
a
I
typical,
know, I get
I have
it.
a typical child.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes, and he's 12, you just fucking give it to him, Mom.
Yes,
you know?
exactly.
Because he's sick of it too. So,
Yes, yeah.
you know, I love your whole family holistic
Everybody.
approach.
Oh, by the way, we also have a program here for siblings.
Can I drop him off?
You know,
We just want to drop the kids off.
It's a sibling program because you know if you think being a parent of a child with special needs is a challenge, there's a whole different experience for the sibling of a child with special needs, and we identified
yes,
something
yes.
here called super sibling syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah,
You
we
know?
heard about
So-
that.
New York was great. She gave us the whole.
I mean, it's really it's such. That's why we're the family center, because the more you dig into it, you know, family systems theory say you change one part of the family, you change the whole, right? We work with grandparents, we work with parents, we work with siblings, because listen, if you think it's tough for you struggling with your child, imagine your parents watching their child struggle with their child.
But I found a
No,
fault in your program.
Yeah.
You don't have a program for Cuban grandmothers.
Yes,
a different level.
Because that is a whole different.
no.
There's grandmothers and then there's Cuban grandmothers, and that is.
I was trained on the Cuban grandmother.
I feel like it's built in, though.
Míreme. Oh, you habla español. Okay, now, the first grandparents we had was some some Latin grandmothers.
Those are difficult. I mean,
Ay,
tell me.
pobrecito, mi
Oh,
niño.
pobrecito.
Él está en angustia, él sufriendo.
yeah?
My mother-in-law, are you kidding me?
My mom lives with me.
Ay,
Yes.
listen, for intervention
She
first
helps
for you.
I think we should send my mother first. She helps.
Yeah.
She helps
So
with the kids. But man,
we
yes.
have the grandparents. As a matter of fact, I have kicked grandparents out and I said to them,
Davie.
if you are here to help, then you're here to help. But if you're not helping, get the hell out.
Yeah. She wouldn't even leave the house to come.
You know?
You know that's not happening. We need a program for Cuban grandmothers.
You heard it here first.
Sponsored by the Disorderly Blondes.
It's a big one. Grandparents are a big issue.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Julia, walk us through the general intake process at Therapeeds.
So the first thing that happens is when you call, we actually have a team of people that are called intake coordinators. And what they do is we spend about an hour, sometimes hour and a half, on the phone with you, getting a lot of detailed information about your child.
Wow, before you even reach the parking lot.
Absolutely,
I like that.
absolutely, because we want to hear your story.
As long as
And
we don't get
that's-
asked again. You go into the doctor and you say what's wrong, and then somebody else comes in and says, "Hi, what's wrong?" I'm like, "I just told 3 people," and everyone keeps asking me the same damn question. I just want to get to the point.
Well,
Yes.
the reason why we do such a thorough intake is because we don't assume that everyone's for us. Just like
That
how-
everyone's what?
That everyone is for this practice.
Oh, right, okay.
We really don't. We just like I said, not every tool is for everyone. Not every practice is for everyone, and we want to first and foremost make sure that we're a good fit for you, that your child's needs are going to be able to be met here. And we also, I tell people, this is not dry cleaning therapy. This is not drop off and pick up and he'll be fluffed and folded. You know,
that.
so there goes that. You know, so
With
we
all the malls nearby, great shopping. This
All the
stinks.
horses to ride.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so we do the intake process, and then from there, we have evaluation periods because we do intensives. We have evaluation periods, probably about 4 or 5 times a year. So it's not, you know, you just call and you get an eval.
Right.
We have certain times that we actually stop the entire practice. It's when we're not treating, we take a week and we do just evaluations. And that's where people come from all over the world and all over the country to do those evaluations.
Fee for those evaluations?
Yes, there's a fee for the evaluations. Once you do the intake, we send you a shitload of paperwork. So get ready for that. It's about, 20.
Story of our lives.
Yeah. 20 to 25 pages of paperwork.
Yeah.
But guess what? That's including everything from what does your child eat to what do they sleep, how do they poop. We want to know
everything because our entire team reviews that paperwork. We have nutritionists reviewing it, speech language pathologists reviewing it, occupational therapists, psychologists, audiologists, the entire team. So we want to know as much as we possibly can, including medications and what therapies and everything, your birth history. I mean, listen, if you have a tattoo on the left corner of your right nipple, I want to know. Okay?
She does know
No
everything.
comment.
She does know everything. It's the right one, by the way.
So we do that, and so we do the review that paperwork. Then when parents come in, so our evaluations are a 2-day process, we do a 5-hour brain talk. And what that involves is your child comes in and the child goes with the clinical team. And in that 5-hour process, the parents are with me and some of our staff, and I am explaining everything about the brain and what we're doing and what the evaluation looks for. Because by the time they're done, the parents are able to say, oh yeah, that's my kid. I know exactly where their problem is. And most of the parents know before we even tell them what's wrong. They know what's wrong just from that brain talk.
But is there wine involved with the parents? No.
There is.
And then a consequence of that. Because I really am tired thinking about that. But no, it's necessary.
Yeah, and so while the parents are in that talk, the team is actually evaluating the child and spending time with the child, seeing the child one-on-one, seeing the child in group context, seeing the child in changing environments so that we get a whole picture of the child, right? So that's what's happening in that first day, 5 hours. Then the second appointment is on another day, and that's when we actually sit and we meet with you individually, and we go through the testing. We go through all of your paperwork. You get the opportunity to ask us questions, and we get the opportunity to ask you questions and to give you the details of the evaluation.
Individually, you mean you meet with the parents?
With the
about
parents.
The child's results.
About the child's results.
Not with each parent individually.
No, with the
No,
parents about
right,
the
'cause
child's
that would
results.
be-
Yeah. And so, and that's when we, and I say to people, we do a strengths-based evaluation here, which means I'm not looking for what's wrong, I'm looking for what's right. And I look forward. I truly look forward for when I can do an evaluation and say, there's nothing wrong with your child, the problem is you. There's nothing delights me more than that, So we look for the child's strengths, we look for the family strengths, and we're able to say, here's what's going on that's good, here's where the challenges are, here's where the problem is in the brain, here is what we could do, and sometimes we say, we can't. So it's the evaluation in and of itself, it's a product. I tell people I don't evaluate for the purpose of people coming here. First of all, I don't expect everybody to come here, and I don't expect everybody who's evaluated to have treatment here. The evaluation is education. And I say after you're done, you leave with information about your child that you could do something with. Whether that something is done here or not is none of my business.
I feel like there might be a lot of tears too.
Oh, tons.
Do you not see all the tissues in every corner?
Every corner of the building.
I noticed every room they opened had a thing of tissues.
Yes, we should take out stocks and Kleenex. Really, we should.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's a saying that goes, you don't cry when you lose hope, you cry when you find it. And so there are a lot of tears, but most of those tears are parents saying, wow, this makes so much sense. I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
You've given me information. Listen, we realize not everyone's going to be able to come here, right? It's a private practice. And to have therapy that individualized, most kids who come here are here for 3 to 6 weeks, and they're getting anywhere from 4 to 6 hours of therapy every day. So it's intensive. It's 14 years ago, when I started using the word intensive, there was no one in South Florida using that word. Now it's a word all over the place. And I've, my marketing people have said, oh, well, maybe you should come up with a different word now that everyone's using the word intensive. And I'm like, no, because there ain't another word. It's intense.
You redefined it.
Yeah, it's intense, really. It's intense. It's intense for everybody. It's intense for the parents. It's intense for the kids. It's intense for our staff. I mean, we live in 3-week cycles in this building, and we are like all of the time. And we don't take this for granted. We don't. There's never a day we get up and we're like, oh, I got this. No, we bite our nails through every freaking one of these intensives, and we know what we're doing, but we also know that the brain is complex, and you never know. Every intensive, it's like, okay, this is the one that's going to take us down. I tell you, this is the brain that, that it's not going to work for. And then we work our asses off to make sure that we deliver.
I love it.
And is there, I know you don't take insurance, so can you share what that fee is for the parents to do the evaluation?
Well, the fee, I believe the evaluation fee is $1,500. That includes basically 6 to 7 hours for the 2 days. And then the intensive fee absolutely ranges based on number of components.
Meaning that's the 3 to 6 week one.
That's the 3 to 6. The length of the intensive, the number of components. You can have an intensive that involves something as little as 2 components, occupational therapy and sound intervention, to something as much as 7 components. So that range is very, very wide, and I don't even have a number for that one for you. However, what I can tell you is we did, first and foremost, I always laugh and say if Julia Harper's children needed Julia Harper, she couldn't afford it. And I am aware of that. And it's a barrier, and we are concerned about that. However, it is a highly individualized intervention, and most of our costs goes to what you are experiencing, and when you have staff that have a lot of letters behind their name, you know what that means, right? Yeah. So we have highly specialized individuals in this building. But as a practice for the company, one day we sat and we looked at the outcomes that we get. For a 3 to 6 week intervention, we get on average 6 months to a year and a half worth of gains every 3 weeks, and that's been consistent.
That was one of our questions about the gains and what you're seeing, and
that was actually
things that you
next
see,
yeah.
typical gains that you
It's
see. What turns
I would
you
say
on,
on average it's a year's worth of gain. On the low end it's 6 months, and that's for a 3 week intervention. And for a 6 week intervention, we see up to a year and a half, sometimes 2 years worth of gains. And not only do we see that consistently, and I say that without pride, but just as a matter of fact and as a matter of function, because I have to put my head on the pillow every night. We did the math, and we said if a parent had to go out there doing traditional therapy, and we factored in the number of hours of intervention, the travel time, and all of the things that come.
Gas, alcohol.
All of it. When we saw the cost relative to the gain, it's a bargain. And we had to do it because I wanted everyone in the company to stand by our product. I wanted everybody to understand we need to be at peace with this. We need to be able to look our parents in the eye. And this practice started with me, like you said, in a room by myself, and it grew from word of mouth. Right? It truly did. I don't advertise. We have our website. That's it. I've never, ever advertised. Everyone who comes here because somebody told them to come here. And at the end of the day, people don't talk about what doesn't work. And the truth of it is, we hold ourselves highly, highly accountable. When parents come here on day 1 of their intervention, we sit with them and we write goals with them. It's not our goals, it's theirs. We get frank with you. This isn't just about how we change your child's brain. Screw that. If it's not showing up in your life, it is meaningless. So what we sit down and we say is, what would you like to see? The words that we use in this center is, at the end of these 3 weeks, at the end of these 6 weeks, what big gift would you like? What do you want to see different? What's going to get you on the phone calling your girlfriend saying, I spent all of this money and all of this time in therapies, and my child can now what? And then they tell us what that is, and we break that down into real measurable outcomes. Because I could show you differences on paper, but it amounts to a hill of beans if it doesn't turn into a difference in your real life. So what we've been able to do is consistently deliver on those outcomes. And that's what I'm proudest of, because we show up for our parents. It's a labor of love. It's a lot of work. And we get down in the dirt. We've been here till midnight. Our record is we were here till 1:30 in the morning with a kid, working with a kid who was not adaptable and resisting doing something, and his parents were like, I can't believe that. And I'm like, if this is what we have to do, this is what we have to do, because we know that when a family takes their money and their time, takes time off of their jobs, leaves their others behind, leave work, leave life to come here for 3 weeks to 6 weeks, they have given me everything that's important to them: their child, their time, and their money. Don't think for a second I don't hold the responsibility of that in my hands every friggin' day. It is a burden and a privilege. It's a joy to be a part of it, and it's very intimate and personal to me. So I don't get up any morning thinking, oh, I'm the shit. Hell no. I get up every morning going, what do you want me to do today, God? Just show me what you want me to do. How do I show up? How do I make that change that you asked me to make when you saved my life?
So I have to say, I was very impressed when I walked in and we took a tour with Nirka. She was fabulous, by the way. This place, dear listeners, you need to know why this place really is a big deal. It's 30,000 or more square feet.
30,000 square
feet, over 65 employees, therapists, administrative, everything. The bottom floor was it's all for kids, all kids, and we saw beautiful therapy rooms. And I mean, state of the art, top of the line. I felt like I was in California somewhere, like something that you read about. You know, when you read like one of those, like, oh, this spa is, and you're like, where is it? Is it here in Miami? No, it's in California. Of course it is, or New York, or Colorado, or something like that. Beautiful rooms. We did not allowed to take photos of what we saw, but beautiful rooms. The colors, every little detail
was thought of
ahead of time.
And as serene as the building is, it's at the same time it's buzzing. There's like this low buzz of activity.
Yes, every room,
everything,
children,
and it's just amazing.
Can we talk about the no shoe zone?
We have photographs for that.
We entered an area with no shoes allowed. I put my shoe covers. I have those
at
my home. The entrance, people have to put on their choose to go in socks or their shoe covers. And then the second floor is for the adults
and teenagers.
There's a business center for parents who are staying here if they want to there's a telephone booth.
I'm getting in that booth.
Can we go take a picture?
We're gonna get a picture in that booth.
That's amazing.
There's a soundproof. It looks like I'm going to be transported somewhere else. A business center.
Gym.
There's a full gym for the parents. Was
that cute fit girl in there?
I wanted her out.
I was wondering if that was a plant to make us feel bad that we need to get in there.
I just happened to walk by this cute girl's doing squats and abs, and I'm like, all right, stop, really.
That was a mom. That's
but
one
she
of
didn't
our
have
moms,
a worry
actually.
on her face.
No, she was so happy.
Speaks volumes to everything that this building
then
is
there was a
producing.
parent waiting room, which had a full kitchen,
Actually,
sofas.
2 kitchens. One side is kosher, the other side's non-kosher.
Of course.
So every little detail, and you guys, I mean, every outlet we just connected all of our things. Every outlet is thought of, every little detail, and what I like about that is that says a lot about how someone organizes their practice, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot of times we go into a doctor's office and there's papers everywhere and
the baseboards are dirty.
Yes, and nobody even knows your name. And again, I have to repeat myself 3 times. And you're here for who and what appointment and what time. So everything here is in order. And
the devil is in the details.
Yes, and I at least felt just at ease the second I walked in. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing.
The second, I even asked if the scent of coffee was being piped in the parent room. I was like, okay.
The separate rooms had different temperatures. Is that on purpose too? Or
Yes, I felt it.
So we're like, it's cold, but this room is warm, and lots of Kleenex.
Yes, lots
yes. So there's
our
a playroom,
laughter
a
and our
gym.
tears, our happy tears.
There's a yoga center, an
saw
art
the
studio.
yoga. We saw the art studio, the yoga room, the multi-purpose room. There's
the teen. I'm going to.
the teen room is so cool.
Oh my God, and the hashtags.
All the hashtag paintings.
You get them.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a garden. I saw that.
Yes,
Because the
yes,
center. How
yes.
long have you been at this actual physical location?
We moved here March of this year.
So,
Yeah.
so it's definitely a dream. If I could take back, long story short, a trip we did out of the country for our kids. I would put all those funds into this instead. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Anyway, just wanted to share, and we did take some pictures that we'll share with you, and you have a media kit. Like I said, you're going to give us so we could share some. I mean, our viewers are, they're going to want to know, and listeners, and everyone.
But it's been a joy and a pleasure from beginning to end. There's something about you that is, you are a bright light, and I know it's very apparent that you work very, very hard in translating that. Whether it was the girl who opened the door for me when I came in or a parent, everyone gets it, and your vision is really permeating all throughout this buzzing, busy building. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Give us a little bit of make and take here. What's a simple exercise, if any, parents can use maybe on a daily basis for their kids to help them increase some of their cognitive reception or improve their attention span. For the kids, not us, we promise.
You drink wine and the kids can not.
I see her. I know how your brain works. And you're
wheels are
thinking there's
turning.
no simple fix. There's
Yeah,
no
that's
one
actually. But you
answer.
did say that when you bring a 6-week-old, you might tell the parent, go away and do this, and this, and might help the child. Like, and, initially, like as they're growing up or in the beginning.
Well, and that would only be in the context of them then not being anything really wrong.
Besides wanting to remove the mother from the premises.
We can always say, like, for memory, like do crossword puzzles or for those kind of like little tidbits.
So that's this is why
Take vitamins.
Publishers
Eat
and
healthy.
people who talk to me hate talking to me because we always want the 5 easy steps, right, or the 3 simple things that you can do.
Human nature.
And unfortunately, we're talking about our brain. So I would say the number one thing I would recommend to any parent is get the hell out of your kid's way. That's the simplest thing that I could tell you. Really, honestly, it's less about the kids and it's what about you. Because what happens is your child is going to be your child, and your child is going to have the struggle that they have wherever their problem is in the brain, be it at level 1 of the brain where they're not connected to the world, or level 2 of the brain where they can adapt to the world, or level 3 of the brain where the problem is they can't move as fast as the world, they can't process information as quickly as the rest of the world, and so they're struggling because everything's happening faster than they can handle it, or because their problem is on the right side of the brain where they can't understand the world in context, or the left side of the brain where they can't get details, right? The problem your child is going to have is going to be any one or a combination of those things, right? Because they can have problems in multiple areas of the brain. That's part A. Your child is your child. You didn't choose them, they chose you. They showed up, you are here. The thing that you can most change right now is you. Who are you in the midst of this? And I would say because stress is the number one factor that affects a child in pregnancy, I'm also going to extend and say parental stress is the number one factor that affects neuroplasticity and the development of a child's brain. Simply because a stressed parent is a negative parent. And a negative parent is a parent who is not supporting brain development.
So what you're saying is don't fast forward to chapter 7. I'm just double checking.
I know. Don't. You should see my face. I wish people could see my face. Don't.
It's I versus
no more chapter 7.
No
Okay,
more chapter
Dylan, you're in
7.
trouble, my baby.
I just gotta tell you, I'm gonna pick my battles on one of the worst set of words parents can ever utter. It's actually the credo and motto of the parent who is permissive and lax and in freeze. But that's a different conversation.
Yes, that's definitely not me. I'm not lax at all. Julia, thank you so much for taking the time to drink with us. Speak with us about this lengthy topic. Yes. I hope our listeners and viewers found this information helpful. I cannot believe you have been here in this beautiful space all this time and we did not know about you because, we know everything. We totally know everything.
You know now.
I don't know. It's been a real pleasure and I'm pretty sure I now need a nap. After lunch, that is.
Of course. Hard Rock is right there.
No?
Okay. Anyway, that's it for today's episode. I'm so sad. Bring me the tissues. Please do know that we have a brand new YouTube channel featuring our season 2 episodes. We're able to share photos and additional information on there, not usually available through the podcast platform. You'll see lots of pictures on this episode. Check it out, subscribe, and please share.
We are active daily on Instagram and Facebook and once in a while on our Twitter account. Also, our website, disorderlyblondes.com, always has additional information based on the episode topics, links to sources mentioned, and the hilarious show notes section with extended blonde jokes you do not want to miss.
Love those show notes. If you listen on Anchor, and you should, but even if you don't, you can use the Anchor app. Did not write that.
Oh my God.
That was me. Voice messages for dedications, props, or just say hi. We love hearing from every single one of you. Honestly, it brightens up our day learning more about our disorderly tribe.
Christy, do you think we could find a Cuban bakery here in Davie?
Good luck with that, Bren. Let's go get some Florida OJ or key lime pie over at Bob Roth's. Yum.
Actually, true story. Do you know there really is a Vicky Bakery nearby? I looked it up
I
yesterday.
or no I or no?
Yeah.
I.
Vicky Bakery.
Ay, ay, ay.
How will we choose where to go for lunch? What do you think, Julia? Have you ever been to Vicky Bakery?
I have.
Oh.
Not shocked. On that note, over and out, everyone. Thank you for listening. Adios.
Bye. Adios. Gracias.